and it's straight to make you feel better. Walk out of this place and defeat them in your secret battle. Show them you can be your own man again. Don't explain. Lots of little victories take on the pain. It takes so long to earn. You can double up or you can burn. You can burn. And I wish I knew the right words to make you feel better. Walk out of this place and defeat them in your secret battle. Show them you can be your own man again. And I wish I knew the right words to blow up the pokies and drag them away. Yeah, taking the food off the table so they can say that the trains run on time.
Okay, welcome everybody. So we're going to begin handing over to Jim Wackett. Jim, just get you to unmute and you're good to go.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Jim Wackett. I'm a General Manager here at Wesley Mission, where I oversee our work on gambling reform. I've been in touch with a lot of you online tonight before, and it's great to have you with us this evening. But before we begin, I want to acknowledge the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on this evening, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'm conscious that there are many people on the call tonight on many different lands and countries, and I'd like to acknowledge the many peoples of those lands that they've stewarded for millennia, land that was never seen, that always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We've got a lot to get through this evening and a great lineup. And to get us moving, I'm going to hand you over now to our MC for this evening, my colleague here at Wesley Mission, Tracy Brooks.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, and we're really thrilled that you can join us here tonight for what is a first of a really interesting online forum to discuss gambling reform. And here's from some fantastic speakers. I'd like you all to use the chat function that exists on Zoom. So if you can use your chat function, really love to hear what is it around, where you're joining us from, and why gambling reform is important to you. So we'll keep an eye on the chat function throughout the course of the evening, and any questions that you may have as well, please feel free to raise them. So as we are talking about a number of issues around gambling reform, we encourage you to reach out and make contact if you do feel that some of the content is too much for you, either through the Gambling Aware helpline on 1800 858 858 or Lifeline on 13 11 14. I'm going to firstly invite Reverend Stu Cameron, who is the CEO and Superintendent of Wesley Mission, and he's going to share with you a little bit about why this issue is so important to Wesley Mission to get the conversation rolling. So over to you, Stu.
Thanks very much, Tracy, and welcome everybody. It's awesome to have you with us, and a special welcome to some really special guests who are going to be sharing with us a little bit later on. We really hope tonight will be incredibly informative, energising, engaging, and really continue to build on the momentum that we have for gambling reform across our nation, but here in New South Wales in particular. Gambling reform is one of 3 advocacy priorities for Wesley Mission that we established about 18 months ago. The 3 priorities are suicide prevention and mental health, housing affordability and availability, and then finally, gambling reform. These were the issues that were identified by our almost 2,500 staff as they engaged with our clients and those we serve within the community, identifying them as the most critical issues that we believe we can help address and see significant change. But why gambling reform particularly? Let me really quickly, in the very brief time I have, give you 6 reasons why this is such a critical issue for us. Number 1 is impact. Gambling is a massive issue for Australia, more than $25 billion lost every single year. And a recent survey we conducted at Wesley Mission here in New South Wales, 32% of all respondents, more than 1,000 surveyed, identified they knew had a friend, a family member or a colleague they knew who'd been directly impacted by gambling harm. Another university study identified that somewhere between 700,000 and 1.3 million New South Wales residents had been directly or indirectly impacted by gambling harm themselves. So impact is number 1. Number 2, why is it important to Wesley Mission? Well, this is something that we have deep and profound experience of. Wesley Mission established the first gambling counselling service in Australia in 1989. That was built off the back of our experience in establishing Lifeline, the helpline service that we pioneered in 1963. And hearing those help seekers reaching out to us and identifying gambling as one of the key issues that was causing them to reach out for help. So there's that lived experience of the impact of gambling harm, which continues to this day with our fabulous gambler-aware counsellors, our financial counsellors, our gambler-aware helpline, which we run here in New South Wales and across other services. Number 3, gambling reform is consistent with our vision and mission. Our vision at Wesley Mission is to do all the good we can because every life matters. This is good work we're doing, important work. And it's consistent with our mission to continue the work of Jesus Christ in word and deed. Jesus was on the side of the poor and the oppressed, on the side of justice. Number 4, it's consistent with our Christian roots. Gambling reform should be and will be good news for our community, for release for the prisoner, those who've been oppressed by gambling harm. Number 5, it's a matter of justice. Gambling harm is a matter of injustice, and that needs to be corrected. And I'm reminded by the words of the great Martin Luther King Jr., who said that the arc of the universe bends towards justice. And we believe here in New South Wales, we're seeing the arc bend towards justice when it comes to gambling reform, when we see the momentum that's been building. And finally, why is this so important for us? Well, we see that the community appetite is there. This is a moment in time. It's one of those kairos moments we talk about in biblical terms, where we have an opportunity to press for real change that hasn't been possible for the last 6 decades. 76% of New South Wales residents support the introduction of a cashless gaming card. Astounding figures. 66% of New South Wales residents believe the gambling lobby has too much power. There's an appetite within the community, latent in many, but which can be activated. And we believe that a small group of people can activate that appetite and bring real political pressure to bear. Here at Wesley Mission, we often will say that we're not here simply to make a noise, we're here to make a difference. And we want to partner with our friends like the Alliance for Gambling Reform and others towards gambling reform here in our state, real, proportionate, sensible gambling reform that will transform the lives of so many New South Wales residents and families. That's why we're here. That's why tonight so important.
Awesome, Stu. Thank you so much for that powerful introduction to this evening's session. I've been looking at the chat, so we've got such a fantastic representation across different sectors, some of our coalition friends, GPs, and a number of those of you with very real lived experience. So welcome everyone to the session today. Next up, we have Nick Fisher, who is the practice specialist of gambling counselling here at Wesley Mission. This is part of the Gambling Aware program, which is funded through the Office of Responsible Gambling. And the service provides free and confidential support for people impacted by gambling harm. So in this capacity, Wesley Mission's counselling across the Northern Sydney and Central Coast region assist people with general gambling counselling, self-exclusion, assistance for partners and family members of gamblers, and complete advocacy and engagement work to promote harm reduction. So Nick is going to share a little bit about his work and the real harm that gambling is causing. So it's great to see you again, Nick. I'll hand over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tracy. And truly, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants this evening with all these fantastic people involved in such an important space. And I thank you for those comments. The work that we do here at Wesley, it really goes to such a point for me about the individual and the personal impact that I'm seeing and that seems to be coming across in so many people that I interact with and I'm fortunate to get to interact with on a regular basis. I don't think I'd be breaking the mold or really offering anything new to say that gambling is and has been an issue in New South Wales for a number of years now. But if you think about the advocacy that we're seeing, the feedback that we're getting from the community, and the reception that we're getting when we go to events and we engage on a community and educational level with people who have been detrimentally affected by gambling, we're hearing lived experience stories of people who are really suffering, people who are falling through the gaps and cracks of our society, and people who don't get the kind of help and support they always need. I'm fortunate, I get to work with a lot of really interesting people from all different types of backgrounds, all different types of people. And, I've learned there is no such thing as your typical gambler. It doesn't discriminate against any kind of demographic, be it gender, age, race, creed, religion, any kind of belief system or anything around that. What we see is that this thing called gambling has become so detrimental, so harmful, and has been largely unchecked in so many different ways for such a long time that, we here at Wesley are still seeing people almost on a daily basis who have been affected by this in such a way. To try and put maybe a bit more of a positive spin on it if I can, I'm also really fortunate in the sense that with the clients who I get a chance to interact with and my team gets to work with too, there is absolutely a sense of hope that comes through there. Hope in the sense that they're seeing a lot in the reform and advocacy space about changes which are being proposed and even implemented now. Hope in the sense that we have a lot of people who have overcome some tremendous hardships in terms of financial losses, in terms of separation from family, in terms of help from isolation, loneliness and alienation, everything that goes along with that. But we're still seeing this as obviously a very current issue. And after the last election cycle, when there was a lot of media and attention on the issue, when that dissipates, it's really important to remember the human being and the suffering that can go along with that doesn't dissipate as things kind of remove from the news cycle. So we are still seeing a lot of people who are really sort of negatively impacted. But with the work that we're doing, I just want to highlight three very key areas very quickly. The gambling counselling, the direct therapeutic counselling that we do with people, which makes a huge difference in terms of their lives through different types of supports that we do. Our community linkers who engage with people on a regular basis in terms of advocacy, community work and engagement. And it was touched on earlier, the Gamble Aware Helpline, which has been a key resource for us to connect with people, vulnerable people in our community who need that help and assistance around gambling. So, I always kind of joke that I'll be in this job for a long time because a lot of work to do, but I do want to end on a positive note and say that despite everything going on and the difficulties and setbacks that we've had, we are seeing a lot of people who are accessing our service and a lot of people who are getting better as a result of the work that we do.
Thank you, Nick, for giving us an insight into your world. Always inspiring hearing you speak and the work you do. It's fantastic. Now, next up, we have another passionate person, Kate Soselia. So Kate is a lived experience campaigner. She's a founder of the Hope Project, and she's also the Voices for Gambling Reform Manager at the Alliance for Gambling Reform. So Kate's coming in from chilly Canberra. So welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. It is an incredible, team that you've brought together, and this is such an important topic. Growing up in New South Wales, I grew up in the Cogra area. That's why I was so thrilled to be able to join Troy last year. earlier this year. Sorry, it feels like a long time ago, to help him in that area, because it's where I grew up. Every single place I went as an 18-year-old, there were pokies. And I had no idea that I was growing up in the pokey capital of the world. It had been so normalized in my upbringing, thinking, okay, I'm at a pub, there's pokies. I'm at a nightclub, there's pokies. It wasn't at all on my radar as something to be concerned about. And now I know so much about how they work, and losses disguised as wins, and near misses, and how they were intentionally designed by psychologists to manipulate brain science to addict normal people. You know, there was absolutely nothing wrong with me, but losing money so quickly, shame takes hold, and you start thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can't I stop? Why can't I walk away? You keep thinking it's the next press, it's the next press, it's the next press. It is the most traumatized state I've ever been in my life. And it took over a decade of cycling in and out of it, thinking, okay, enough time's passed, surely I'm okay now. Figuring if I just win back, you know, everything will be all right. But there was so much I didn't understand about the whole gambling environment in this country. And when I was fortunate enough to learn about it, it made so much sense why it happened to me, and why it has happened to people for decades. And when I looked at the political landscape, it was obvious that they had been protecting the industry and not individuals, not communities, from being financially preyed upon. And so losing a decade and a half of my life, almost taking my life at 32, it could have been the worst outcome for my family and my friends. When I made the decision to go public, because I couldn't stand thinking that other people were being harmed on a daily basis, and not knowing what I now knew and understood about the industry, about the products, about how, you know, $10 maximum bets, you can lose $200 a minute, $6,000 in a half an hour. That kind of financial harm matters, and it happens so quickly, and it overwhelms individuals in such a way that if you've never experienced it, it's so easy to just blame the individual and not understand how this is the perfect machine to addict people. And I think when we understand all that's at play, it's very, very clear that no matter which way you slice it, it makes no financial sense for this level of access to gambling products and this level of financial devastation to be happening in our communities on a day-to-day basis. $25 billion a year. Our tiny nation of 27 million people are losing $25 billion. Like, how can we sustain that level of losses? The answer is we can't. And you see that evidence. When I was experiencing it, I had mental health struggles. I was so deeply depressed. I struggled to get off the couch most days. I'm a mum of 6, so it was really hard sometimes to be present. I felt like I was just a body in a room, but my mind was just whirring over and over about, how can I get out of this? What's wrong with me? Why can't I stop? Having compassion for myself, having compassion for others that have reached out to me over the last 10 years has made all the difference, because the shame was never mine to bear. This was addiction by design, And we need to come together to protect Australians moving forward and stop the senseless ravaging of financial resources out of our communities, because that is the legacy of gambling harm. You may stop, but the financial harm that's occurred is still there. And I think I'm blessed to be able to do the job that I do in, spreading education, spreading awareness, and bringing powerful voices of lived experience to the media and other opportunities for people to learn and understand about gambling harm and how it occurs so quickly and so seamlessly in our culture, and how we can come together to stop it from happening.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much. That was wonderful to hear. And thank you for sharing with us tonight. The session today will cause a lot of comments, and thank you for sending through your comments through the chat. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of our speakers, feel free to send them through. And if we've got time at the end of the session, we'll allow for the questions to come through. We're going to move on with a little change of pace now, and we're going to have a performance. Anya Tyrrell, who is a singer, songwriter and a musician, originally from the counties Clare and Galway on the west coast of Ireland. She's now based in northern New South Wales. We have had a few technical issues, I will admit, in the making sure that the sound works, so please bear with us. We're crossing fingers and toes at this point. So I'll hand over to you, Anya.
Thank you. Apparently there's a little toggle button I need to hit, so I've hit that now and hopefully we're all right. Dia Gwit, hello, and thanks for having me. I'm honoured to be here having this conversation. I've been touring here for over a decade in this country, and I suppose when I first moved here I saw a lot of, music over pokies and a lot of conversation about stopping the pokies, and I suppose as the time has gone on there's less of that, and also as one of your commenters has mentioned, as the time has gone on there's less and less venues for us to play in, less and less venues for community to come together. And the power of community coming together in space like that is so much more than the power of what a win at the pokies can do for anyone. So yeah, I'm very passionate about creating space and community for us, and I think sometimes against big institutions and against corporations and government interests we can feel quite small. And I wrote this song after hearing Patti Smith play live, because I think she reminded me that the people really do have the power. So regardless of what challenges we face or what we're going through, we do need to stay strong and keep believing in change, I suppose, because really, when you think of it, it's only concerned group of citizens like this that do make change in the world. So this is a song I wrote, about rising up together. And you can sing along at home with some of the oohs or comment them away. Up to you, not them. You choose peace or to fight again. A starling finds its way in a neighbor's flight, and it navigates both dark and light. Remuneration can change with just one wing. The force of a constellation of starlings. it's up to you, not them. You choose peace or to fight again. The truth it soars in all of our words, so send it out on the wings of birds. When the wind takes a flock the other way, you can break apart all the brave ones say, and like shadows we fall, and we rise up again, we rise up like shadows we fall, and we rise up again, we rise up like shadows we fall, we rise up again. Revolutionary days have never gone away, still calling out for peace, calling it straight from the hot grace, from the start of warrior and disbelief, and spit at what you see, shame society, bring the lame to the feet, the blind, with no excuse but to see no longer deaf, the words are hers, we have blood, we are free, raise hell, don't let the lion beast be, like shadows we fall, we rise up again, we rise up like shadows we fall, we rise up again, we rise up again, like shadows we fall, we rise up again. And
On behalf of us all, Anya, well done. That's fabulous. Thank you so much. And a miracle. It's all in the toggle switch.
I learned a new thing today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll post a link to Anya's music in the chat throughout the course of the session today. Next up, we have someone who has really taken on the gambling industry head on and is a powerful voice for change in the New South Wales Parliament. We've got Helen Dalton MP, who is the independent member for the seat of Murray, who I know has had a very, very full-on and intensive campaign in the lead up to the state election earlier this year on this particular issue. So as I hand over to Helen, it may cause you to offer comments or questions, so please pop them in the chat for us to capture and respond to when time permits at the end of the session. So I'll hand over to you, Helen, and thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you. I just want to start by thanking or congratulating the Wesley Mission for its long-standing campaign against gambling harms. So you're really at the coalface, I guess, of change, and I believe change is coming. For those who don't know too much about me, I am from around Griffith. I'm from a farm and from the electorate of Murray. So Murray is the second biggest electorate in the state. And I guess I'm almost an accidental campaigner, I think, because Kate Fairman, who may be on this link tonight, I'm not sure, she sent around an email to people, to MPs, saying, would someone be happy to co-sponsor a gambling forum in Parliament? And I thought, well, why not? I took a couple of days to respond to her, but I thought about it quite a bit, and I thought, no, we need to stand up about this. And I've had first-hand experience really from a workman's wife who really has an addiction problem. And what I did find out is that gambling or poker machines certainly target vulnerable people. And my electorate being the second biggest, it extends right to the South Australian border. And a lot of Indigenous communities not just one addiction, but a couple, alcohol and other drugs as well. So I could see that happening, and just the complete loss of, I don't know, self-respect, and I don't know what it is in those communities where things are not right. So I just thought I would dip my hand out and just give Kate a hand with this forum. And I took a big risk, not only that, because you know, Greens aren't particularly popular in my electorate, so I thought I'd weighed that up, even though Kate and I are very good friends. Just the optics around that, because people are just, I don't know, they're just, you know, they had their attitudes. And the other risk I took was that I share the Murray River as a border, and of course, back in the day, there weren't poker machines in Victoria, and of course, a lot of the clubs started up on our side, New South Wales side of the river, and really got going because Victorians would come up and spend their money. So I had all those people there, and that would probably, I thought, support poker machines. But as it's turned out, I guess with overwhelming support from the people of Murray electorate, the media as well, and of course, people coming in from like organisations like Wesley Mission, and for every email or phone call that I received from a club or a pub saying that they didn't really like the stance I was taking, I got probably 10 people stopping me in the street or emails saying, please keep going. And of course, the target, I was warned by a Labor MP, Deborah O'Neill, that they would target me, because they did target, Clubs New South Wales would target me. And of course, I thought, nah, they won't do that. But they sure as hell did. And of course, we had life-size photos of me in most clubs, participating clubs, and also the spread of mistruths about me, about how I wouldn't meet with Clubs New South Wales, which was a complete lot of rubbish. Was never said that, but a lot of stuff was fabricated. 185 million is lost to gambling in my electorate, and of course 2% of that goes back to community, so-called, but it's mostly back to their clubs. And I understand what clubs do, they provide a service and all of that, but I'm asking for clubs to think outside the square. And there are a few that I did meet up with that are thinking outside to provide other things, other ways of entertainment, and that's what we're asking. And I've often said to people, well, I had a pretty crook year on the farm, and I might as well put a couple of pokies at the mailbox. If you want to give me a hand, that's fine, instead of looking at perhaps my business model or doing whatever. I think the awareness now for gambling is that it's an addiction, and people are understanding that now, and I think that's a real quantum leap. And of course, for us in rural electorates, it's there's very little help for those with an addiction or addictive problems with gambling, and that's a real problem. And I think the further west you go, the less support there is. I was told yesterday, from a supporter, that because I'd taken on Clubs New South Wales and all their hoo-ha and what they were going to do to me, that they wouldn't want to be standing around me just in case there was somebody with a bad aim that hit them instead of me. So, I mean, people are concerned about my safety, I think, because they are a big organisation and very powerful, and they've got a lot to lose. Because of the algorithms with gambling and the way people are addicted to it. One thing I would like to do is to continue I'm really opposed, and it should be totally banned, the advertising of gambling. I think that's just disgraceful. It's an invasion into our privacy. Once you know, if you put a punt for sports bet, you're in line then, and you're never left alone. And I think that it should be totally banned. And of course, kids now are watching the games, and they don't even, I think it's more about the gambling now online than it is about watching a particular game. I'd like to take we're in rural areas, and take this campaign to Sydney Parliament. And I think there's certainly an appetite for that. And you could see what's happening in Parliament now. People are getting behind that. And of just speaking to a few and wanting to put a bill through about having a cashless card. And I think that it would attract a lot of media attention and get a conversation going. And of course, the cashless gaming card also, not only does it reduce harm for those that are gambling, but we also know there's a lot of money that's laundered through the poker machines. And that's a big issue in my electorate as well. I know that for a fact. And that's really got to stop. And of course, we've got that from the New South Wales Crimes Commission. It's not just me saying it, it's them as well. So people do want change. I think there's never a better time now that we get stuck into this. It's in the minds of everyone, and particularly other MPs in Parliament as well. And I think that there's always a moment in time, and it was spoken by a previous speaker. And we know the media is getting onto this, and they totally the media make the change. And I think if we can get behind them, or they can get behind us, this is our moment in time. The New South Wales government, I think Labor are kind of wanting to water down reforms, and that's a bit of a concern for me. And they just want to slow down the change. And with that, I guess they're probably hoping that it'll go away or the momentum will lessen. Not if I can help it. I want to keep it front and centre as best as I can. And I do think that the last election with the Perrottet government, if they hadn't have stood up for gambling reform, I think that this government would have had a big majority. And for me, having a minority Labor government, I'm happy that Perrottet government stood up about all of this. Puts me in a great position for change now, and particularly with the results that I did get from the election too. It's almost giving me a mandate to stand up. I know how the people are thinking. I can feel it, and not just in my electorate, but right throughout the state. And I think, with gambling, I talk about broken homes, hungry kids, financial ruin, and in many cases, suicide. And of course, in my electorate, we have 2.5 times the suicide rate of those in Sydney. And I think it's not the whole thing, but it's a contributing factor to what's going on. So I guess I'll leave it there. I'm open for questions. I'm certainly in there for the long haul, and I feel that I have such tremendous support, not just from the Wesley Mission, but from a lot of people around the state and a lot of organisations, and indeed in other parts of the state. And I think Tasmania are leading the way in South Australia, and I think it's New South Wales. It's time for us to pick up the mantle and get on with it. So I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to have questions. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Helen, for joining us in your time. And that was a really great summary of your past year also working through this really important issue. So I really value. So if you have any questions for Helen, please pop them in the chat. All of our speakers will be around for questions after at the end of all of the sessions that they've presented, which is a good segue into our final guest this evening, who I'm sure is well known to all of us. He's a renowned humanitarian and perhaps Australia's best known voice for gambling reform over many years now. And he's also one of Wesley Mission's great friends. That is Rev Tim Costello. So Tim, I'll hand over to you, and you can bring up the rear for us with your views on gambling reform and putting pokies in their place.
Let's try that. Thank you very much, and it's a honour to actually be with so many courageous people tonight. For those watching, of course, there's Helen Dalton. I don't think we've actually personally met, have we, Helen?
I passed you in the corridors of Parliament last November.
Oh, good.
Little did I know where I'd be. Where I'd end up.
Well, you were to be shirt-fronted by Josh Landis and New South Wales clubs. And not only did Josh Landis miss, but he shirt-fronted himself. And the remarkable swing in your direction is a pure testimony to courage and principle. So thank you, Helen. To the wonderful Kate Sazelja, a colleague at Alliance for Gambling Reform, for a good 10 years plus of my advocacy on gambling, which really started in 1995. It was me out there. I knew of so many people like Kate who had stories, but the shame silenced them. The stigma that you were irresponsible, gamble responsibly in this wonderful industry that Australians love is let down by people like you. The courage for people like Kate and Anna and so many others to speak up broke the silence. And in my view, that changed the game, because suddenly it wasn't just Tim Costello rabbiting on, it was people talking about what actually this predatory machine does. The blame of the individual was a message picked up from the NRA by Anthony Ball and Josh Landis in 2012 when they went to America. Guns don't kill, people kill, never blame the gun. Came back, you must never blame the machine, blame the individual. Gamble responsibly, there's a few pathetic individuals nobody can help. Well, you speaking up, Kate and so many others said, no, it's the machine. It's built for addiction. It's the machine. The very courageous Stu Cameron and Jim and Wesley. I happen to know how politics works. I know how when you run a big welfare organisation, even though there's individual donations, there's lots of state grants. With 12 years of government and scandals, Minns was always going to win. He didn't get a majority, Helen, because of people like you standing up and the community standing up. But Stu and Wesley had to factor in, would there be retribution? Would there be payback? Because Minns was clearly dragging his feet, pushing it out to a trial, really mouthing the lines of New South Wales clubs in that election. It was transparently the case. The courage of Stu and Jim and Wesley to stand up, knowing that there might be retribution with their grants, with their work, was enormously courageous. The courage of Troy, who's on this call. You know, Troy, who worked for New South Wales clubs in compliance, blew the whistle on the lack of any compliance when it came to criminal money laundering. The way Clubs New South Wales set out to destroy Troy, to destroy all the assets he owns, knowing that he already had cancer. And if it had been most humans in society, we would have just said nothing, saved our home, gone quietly. Troy, facing the worst of the most personal fights, stood up. And to walk the streets of Kogarah in the campaign with Troy, after he'd been doing chemotherapy the day before and should not have been out, was simply amazing. And then there are other very courageous people on this call, and many of you who have raised your voice. You're courageous because to raise your voice is really quite difficult. You see, what we are dealing with in biblical language is what the Apostle Paul calls principalities and powers, spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, let me explain a bit of that in my journey. I got engaged in this issue being a lawyer for a woman who didn't smoke or drink, who'd never been in trouble with the law, who was middle-aged, who had 3 beautiful daughters, who when pokies were introduced in 1992-93 to Victoria, got addicted, ended up stealing $60,000 from her employer, was sentenced, even though I was her lawyer, you wouldn't get this today, sentenced to 4 years jail. I visited her at Tarrangower Women's Prison. And I just sat there saying, how does a middle-aged woman who has never been in trouble with the law, has no other addictions, end up serving 4 years? And a light went on in my head. These machines are built for addiction. Well, when I started campaigning in 1995, I got sued by the Victorian Casino and Gaming Authority because I said their regulation of Crown Casino made them the weakest statutory body in the state. They sued me for defamation. I nearly lost my home. Now after Royal Commissions into Crown, have a look at the regulatory bodies. I then was joined by people like Kate and others who really started breaking the silence. And I wrote a book with Royce Miller in 2000 to really answer one question. Why does Australia have the greatest losses in the world? I'd convinced my brother, then Treasurer, to do a Productivity Commission inquiry. It found that 43 cents in every dollar going through a poker machine came from someone who was addicted or had developed a problem. Saying gamble responsibly is like saying, well, use heroin responsibly. I discovered we had 20% of the world's pokies. We didn't know that until 1999. We now know, with later productivity commissions, 75% of the world's pokies in pubs and clubs. Most pokies in the rest of the world are in casinos. It is a slightly different business. You've got to get to the casino. You've got to get home. You know you're going there to gamble. You think about it. When they're every fourth block, you have half an hour on your parking when you're doing your shopping. You didn't go to gamble, and they're open. And they're open. And you find yourself drawn in. Accessibility to productivity commissions said creates why we have the greatest gambling losses, 40% higher than anywhere else in the world. So I wrote this book to answer that question. I started with the assumption that Australians just have it in their DNA to love gambling. We're baptized at birth in eucalyptus oil and a punt. That makes us Aussie. I was amazed doing a literature review to discover the Kiwis, the English, the Chinese, the Irish, yes, Ain, the Irish, all absolutely claim to be the greatest gamblers on earth. These boasts, cultural boasts, were not unique to Australia. So in writing that book, I had to come up with, well, how do we have the greatest losses in the world and the greatest number of damage to families in the world? And the answer was that a principality in power, a spiritual wickedness in high places, had literally captured politics and commerce and culture, and now was systematically, like powers and principalities do, running the state. I remember dear old Rob, the independent from Port Macquarie, who was shadow gaming minister in New South Wales, Rob, what's his name? You'll know him. Put Gillard in office. Anyway, dear old Rob saying to me, Tim, when I was shadow gaming minister in New South Wales politics, this is 25 years ago, I realised the clubs and AHA run the state. He said that to me. And I thought, well, that's a bit rich. But then this book and researching it showed me this is actually true. The only two places with legal pokies in the world were Las Vegas, run by the mafia, and Sydney. And when they moved from being coin operated, where you couldn't do much damage, you're putting 2 shillings into a machine and pulling a lever, you couldn't do a lot of damage. When they moved to electronic, they were on steroids. When I say I believe that every American under the Second Amendment has a right to a gun, I say they have a right to a ball and musket rifle. That's what the Second Amendment technology was. The same right now is semi-automatic weapons. The right to play coin-operated pokies moved digitally, and suddenly, as Kate said, you could lose with $10 bet spin $6,000 in half an hour. Semi-automatics. And the same cultural capture, but Australians just love to gamble. It's just who we are. And who are you to raise any questions? Well, this principalities and powers, spiritual wickedness in high places had captured both sides of politics. The second Productivity Commission report, Kevin Rudd in opposition before he became Prime Minister asked what he should do on gambling. I said, have a second Productivity Commission report. It came out. It found that things were even worse. It recommended, both Productivity Commission reports recommended effectively the universal cashless card. We used to call it a mandatory pre-commitment card. So we've known what the answer is for a long time from two Productivity Commission reports. Gillard, who was then Prime Minister, tried to implement it, and Clubs New South Wales with the AHA rolled us. They absolutely terrified Labor backbenchers who walked into Gillard's office as PM and said, we're voting for Kevin Rudd to be Prime Minister if you do not pull this reform of a mandatory pre-commitment card. Gillard rang me as Prime Minister when I was in Martin Place, launching the pushback to defend the mandatory pre-commitment card, the universal card. Gillard in tears saying, I can't withstand the heat, Tim. Clubs New South Wales have terrified my members, particularly New South Wales members. I can't withstand the heat. She had suborned the Speaker, what's his name? Mine's going. Liberal.
Peter Slipper.
Peter Slipper. To be a vote thinking Wilkie. She gave him the Speaker's chair that Wilkie would pull his support, but she had to capitulate. In that debate, the lies, the fear, the power, the muscle of Clubs New South Wales and AHA in New South Wales and Queensland was something I will never forget. Peter Garrett and I were to speak at Rabbitohs to debate Alan Jones, who of course was supporting the Clubs New South Wales. Federal police ring us, say we can't guarantee your safety. We had to not turn up to the event. The fury, think of Trump's crowds with his trial happening, what'll be today, tomorrow. It was like that. And the message was from New South Wales clubs and AHA until along came a Helen Dalton, you can't touch us. We are the power. We will always beat you. We rolled a Prime Minister. Well, that's where there is two other heroes I just want to mention. One is Bevan Shields of the Sydney Morning Herald, the editor. You know, for the Herald, who have a little complication that 9 papers have a lot of sports bet advertising and revenue and 9 TV, a little complication. But Bevan rang me and Lee and Stu and I talked to him and he said, we're going to be serious. They ran a campaign that I really haven't seen. Of course, the Telegraph went the other way and Sky TV, but they were so principled. The other hero is Dom Perrottet, and Helen has referred to this. Without going into too many details, I was with Dom when he was clearing out his Premier's office on his last day. I was the last visitor he had. Basically, besides Victor Dominello in the party, Dom Perrottet had nobody else for this reform. Dom Perrottet had to threaten certain things that I won't go into on the eve of an election to get his party to stand up for the cashless card, which 2 Productivity Commission reports have recommended. Incredible principle and courage. He didn't do it for political reasons. He did it for principled reasons. He'd seen the damage. He'd started talking about that with Stu at the Wesley Easter breakfast. There was a principled politician taking on the powers and principalities, which sadly Chris Minns wouldn't do. He just wouldn't do. Well, what we have seen is now a turning point. 2 things changed. The first thing that changed was Victor Dominello, in his last act, because Clubs New South Wales claimed his scalp as a gaming minister. They were that powerful still then. commissioning a New South Wales Crime Commission report. I think the rest of his cabinet forgot about it. It went under the radar. When suddenly it was a New South Wales Crime Commission report saying billions of dollars of dirty money, it went from just those problem gamblers, terrible language, but that's the industry language, they're irresponsible, to, oh, the drug dealer selling ice to our kids is cleaning it up in the pokies. The hot goods from our home burgled is getting cleaned up at the pokies. Suddenly the whole of the community is saying, yeah, this isn't just about the damage it does to those who play the pokies. We're all at risk. That was such a significant turning point. The very other significant turning point, in my view, in addition to all the courageous people on this call that stood up, was the saturation ads of sports betting on TV. Literally, mums and dads across Australia had a collective psychic vomit. They just said, this is not acceptable. Why has this captured our sport? Well, they'd captured politicians, they'd captured commerce, look at the monies, so much easy monies and political donations. They captured all Australians like a punt. Now they captured sport. If you watch the sports ads, they've captured community. Gamble with your mates, friendship, mateship is now brought to you by foreign-owned, many of them ain't Irish, foreign-owned sports betting companies that pay no tax here, where kids who couldn't tell you the difference between a Marlboro packet of cigarettes or a Peter Stuyvesant packet of cigarettes, because we've got rid of cigarette advertising, can tell you the odds on sports bet, on NRL, on AFL. They can tell you the logos, the jingles, the odds. That second thing of saturation advertising, I think, is also why the corner is being turned. If you saw Four Corners last night, you just saw how deep this goes. Down to fourth grade soccer and fifth grade cricket, community cricket and amateurs, with data radio people feeding it into the gambling companies, club presidents saying, I had no idea. Why would anyone be betting on our low-level cricket, soccer, league, or AFL? Capturing sport. Well, we got a long way to go to win this battle of banning sports betting ads. I think Labor are going to have the acid put on them when Gil McLaughlin of the AFL and Vlahos, is that his name, of the NRL, pick up the phone and say, $50 million the NRL's getting, 15% of every bet, don't you dare. AFL won't even reveal their percentage of every bet, but it's massive millions of dollars. It's going to be interesting to see federally if Albo can withstand the heat, if the coalition can withstand. We're at a very interesting point in this whole campaign. Well, my time is up, except to say that I answered the question, why has Australia got the greatest gambling losses? For one very simple reason. We have got the worst policies anywhere in the world because we had the greatest political capture by this mammoth, this ravenous mammoth that has captured the culture and sport and community. And you're right, Ain, music. It has pushed it right out of whatever, all the things that matter to us. And it is now serving it back to us and targeting our kids. We've got the laxest policies anywhere in the world. That's why we've got the greatest losses. Thanks, and back to you, Tracy.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was fantastic. So much backstories and histories there. It's really, really insightful. Now, I know we're scheduled to end our event at 8:30, but I thought we'd allow 10 minutes for questions. So please feel free to stay on if you're able to. The advantage of being an online event, I suppose, is you don't have to feed a parking meter, so you can probably avail the extra 10 minutes. But what I would actually like to do is ask one of the questions that came through the chat to you, Helen. How did you stay strong when you had the clubs intimidating you?
I guess because I know that I've got most people behind me, and the people that have come out against me are really just the clubs, or Clubs New South Wales, and certain clubs and pubs. So I'm here to represent the majority of people, and I've certainly got more than the majority of people behind me. And I think when that happens, then, you know, it's easy. It's easy for me to stand up. And I suppose I was a little naive. You know, I didn't really, I knew Clubs New South Wales were a very powerful lobby group, but I just thought it was just plain wrong, and that you know, we've had this opportunity in Parliament at this forum to get some information, and I just think it's good people need to stand up, and that's what I did.
Well done. We honour you for that, Helen. That's amazing. Stu, a question for you that's related to the ongoing issues that's happening in state parliament around poker machine reform. So even if the government committed tomorrow to a cashless card, it would still take some time to implement. So as one of the leaders of the reform movement here in New South Wales, what would you like to see implemented as a priority?
Yeah, thanks for that, Tracy. I think first of all, Jim and I met with the new gaming minister, David Harris, a few weeks ago, and came away actually encouraged by that meeting and his openness to at least conversation around reform and to press further than the government has thus far committed, certainly during the election campaign. First of all, hold them to account for the commitments they've already made. I'm going to be staggered to see all these VIP signs come down before the end of the year. I mean, they're ubiquitous across our suburbs and towns and cities. And, you know, that's a lot of work for the deconstruction industry over the next few months. So we need to hold them to account around those commitments, campaign reform. But the other, beyond the cashless card, what could be changed overnight would be restriction of gaming hours. There's no good reason for a poker machine venue to be open after midnight. And so we're calling for poker machine venues to be closed between midnight and 10 a.m. There's strong, overwhelming support, community support for that. Nothing good happens in a so-called VIP room after midnight. All the research shows that a lot of the most addictive harm happens at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. When people's desperation levels increase, chasing after losses. And so we think that could happen. It would have a transformative effect for many people, in addition, of course, to the introduction of a cashless gaming card. And the government could flick that switch tomorrow. It could be implemented within months.
Yeah, no need for technology for that. Tim, actually, a question for you, probably following on from last night's program on Four Corners and around sports betting and the idea of gambling responsibly. What can we do to help address the issue around sports betting?
Yes, so last night the program was very good, but it mainly focused on integrity in sport. And, you know, you've got revelations that there's virtually no funding by the feds for the integrity oversight. Shock from local soccer, footy, cricket club presidents that their games are being gambled on. So I think the much more powerful argument, though Four Corners did a really good job of getting undercover at, you know, community sport. I don't know how they pulled that off. That was quite extraordinary. Is the stronger argument is saying this effectively is grooming children. It's a child abuse issue. We do not allow other legal products, whether they're brothels or cigarettes, to be in front of kids where they know about those adult legal products. It's just totally wrong. It's morally wrong. So I think advocating this as a child protection issue I often say adults really only have one job to do, and that's to protect children. And when it comes to our kids, the gambling industry, particularly sports betting companies, have grabbed our kids' minds. I'm old enough to remember when you could only bet at a TAB on racehorses and greyhounds, and a TAB, when they opened up, couldn't serve food. They couldn't even have chairs or seats in them, because we all knew that then the gambling was addictive and you shouldn't encourage it and welcome people. It belonged in the police department in gaming and vice. That's what it was called. It leads to vice. Now it's state sponsored. It's basically celebrated with the deals of NRL, AFL, and I think it's profoundly failing children. So I think speaking up on that and running that argument is the most important way.
Thank you, Tim. Just looking at what other questions are coming through, I'm just mindful of time. I might just ask just a general question to anyone who'd like to take it, which is, what source of revenue can support clubs instead of poker machines? Because that often is the response that people come back with. What are some of the responses to say around alternative sources of revenue in pubs?
I mean, Jim might be able to actually add some statistics here, but Jim, if I recall, it's over 40% of pubs in New South Wales don't have poker machines. So it's quite possible for licensed venues to survive, if not thrive, without poker machines. And there was a South Australian study that showed that for every dollar that was spent on food in a pub or a club, 20 jobs are created for only a handful with poker machines for every dollar that's spent. So poker machines drain jobs. They don't create jobs. They drain people's pockets. They drain the employment pool. They're vampires that suck the life out of communities. They're reverse ATMs that drain the pockets of the community. And so the true economic multiplier in the hospitality industry is, believe it or not, hospitality. That is, food, drinks, venues where great bands and musicians can play and people can gather and enjoy community. So we don't underestimate the trend. It took a long time to get to the position where we are. It will take time to recalibrate, but it is possible. And certainly the community and the economy will be better off in the long run.
Thanks, Stu. Thank you to all of our speakers this evening. So Jim, Stu, Nick, Kate, Anya, and Helen Dalton and Rev Tim Costello, really grateful for your time tonight, and it was a really interesting conversation to have. A reminder for anyone who feels that they need help at this point on this topic, you're more than welcome to contact Gamble Aware. The helpline number is in the chat, or lifeline on 13 11 14. So that concludes things from my end, and I'm just going to hand over now to Jim to say a few closing words to end our session today.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. I'm sure I'm speaking for all of us when I thank you, Stu, for your amazing leadership on gambling reform here in New South Wales. To you, Nick, for the work of you and your team assisting those harmed by gambling. Kate, for your incredible bravery and your passionate advocacy for those with lived experience of gambling harm. Anya, for your wonderful music, reminding us about the power of community and the way you and other artists are speaking out for reform. For Helen Dalton, for standing up for the people of Murray and for your courage in taking on the gambling lobby on in the electorate and winning. For the indomitable Tim Costello, for your decades of hard work on the issue of gambling reform and for giving us inspiration to persevere. I see from a quick look through those online that we've been in the company tonight of a number of other reform advocates. So I'd also like to acknowledge Canon Sandy Grant from St Andrew's Cathedral here in Sydney, of course Troy Stolls and Anna Barsley as well, who's also a lived experience advocate with the Alliance for Gambling Reform, for all the great work that they do. And of course to our wonderful MC tonight, Tracy Brooks. If you haven't already signed up to our campaign and joined the movement for gambling reform here in New South Wales, you can join us at yourbeingplayed.com.au That's yourebeingplayed.com.au. Let me leave you with this encouragement of what can be achieved that I just heard about this week. Norway introduced a mandatory cashless gambling card almost a decade ago, and since then has also banned gambling advertising. A recent gambling harm survey conducted earlier this year indicated that the number of people being harmed by gambling in Norway has halved since 2019. That's halved since 2019. So that's a little bit of a picture of what can be achieved if we continue to persevere, we come together as a movement, and keep pushing for real change. Thanks again for your time, everyone. Good evening, and God bless you.
There was the stage. Be your own man again. Don't explain. Lots of little victories take on the pain. It takes so long to earn. You can double up or you can burn.